Hi, welcome back to my channel. Today, we'll be discussing Business as Unusual by Moscareto. If you haven't already, click the subscribe button now and get your BL Library card for the BL Library. Before we get started, there will be spoilers, so if you don't want to be spoiling this manhwa, go and click off now. No worries, I'll catch you next time. For those of you left behind, let's go over some content warnings. There may be references to overwork, mentions of dieting, bullying, toxic masculinity, breakups, gossiping, excessive drinking, obsession, mentions of cheating, perceived cheating, peer pressure, violence, and ableism, specifically possibly offensive use of the word crazy, as these things do appear in the manhwa. But if that's okay with you, let's go and get started. Minjun's life revolves around his office job. Even when he's off, he's often on the phone fielding inquiries and dealing with issues related to his job. All while he's working, though he puts on a pleasant and helpful front, he's constantly cursing and bemoaning his life. He longs to travel. He longs to do more. He longs to break out of this chaotic and busy humdrum of a life. But right in the middle of his daily venting and daydreaming, he hears a strangely familiar voice nearby. As he nears, the voice reminds him of someone. But it couldn't be. Could it? Minjun wanted a change in his life, but this was not what he was expecting. As it turns out, the person he heard speaking was none other than his college ex-boyfriend, Jinwon. Seeing him again brings back so many sweet memories, but those memories are tainted by the cruel way Jinwon indirectly ended things all those years ago. While Minjun is more than willing to ignore the past and do the bare minimum to keep the peace at work, Jinwon doesn't seem to have the same plan. It looks like, just like in college, Jinwon is all too happy to pursue Minjun despite their rocky past. Their romance was snuffed out before it could really begin in their early 20s. What are the odds that they could do any better in their 30s? To start with, the art in this isn't my favorite. It's very pretty when it's done well, but it looks a bit off when not. Particularly, the eyes are often far too large or close together in some panels, and admittedly, the style feels a bit like off-brand Fujoking. It specifically gives me Dirty Vibration vibes. Don't get me wrong though, this series has beautiful panels, and I'm sure most of you will call me silly for saying it's inconsistent and not my favorite, but I just couldn't bring myself to love it. The smudgy coloring, the sometimes heavy outlines, the occasional classic yaoi hand, and the lack of shading in the expressions just weren't it for me. Many of you will probably love it though, I'm just super nitpicky. Similarly, the story was not it for me, which is wild since it's based on work by Moscareto, who's probably my favorite manhwa writer of all time. I was shocked until I noticed Moscareto was credited for the original, but the writing was credited to someone else, and I was minutely comforted. The story is absolutely chaotic. It tries to shove in as much text as possible, presumably from the novel this is based on, without really tying it into the narrative itself. I've complained about stories being disjointed before. While I'd say this is the truly disjointed story, part of the problem is that the text it fits in isn't necessarily dialogue, but exposition and inner thoughts. I wish we had seen more of what was happening to cause those thoughts, rather than just seeing walls of exposition. I feel that if I read the novel, I'd much prefer that. The adaptation of it into a visual medium just wasn't as well done as I would have expected. Funnily enough, with all the exposition we get, the issue that started all of this tension is just glossed over. This entire story is based on a very silly misunderstanding. So the reason Minjun and Jinwon break up, if you can even call it that, after their first time having sex is because Minjun overhears Jinwon talking about someone being super annoying, that he doesn't know what he was thinking, and that he wouldn't be dragging anything out. Minjun immediately assumes this is referring to him, and rather than confront Jinwon about it, he just leaves. He blocks Jinwon's number, takes a leave of absence from school, and then enlists in the military. It's especially frustrating when it's clear that Minjun is wrong for running away rather than talking, thus leaving Jinwon to wonder what happened. I'm shocked Jinwon even tried to pursue him again, but we're in BL land where everything is possible. Misunderstandings and lack of communication in your first real relationship in your early college years, that's pretty understandable. Annoying, but understandable. However, when they're adults and finally have a chance to clear the air over what occurred, they just never do. They each bring up their side. Jinwon says it was him trying to shake off, quote, clingers, and then after a very brief stint of being friends, they just decide to sleep together, and it's like every wrong has been righted. That was so painfully irritating for me. There is a chance for some clarity and further fleshing out during the side stories, as we see everything from Jinwa's point of view. including the moment that started all the pain and trauma. And just when it seems we're going to finally get a clear version of his side of the story, and as a result, some level of closure, we don't see anything. There's no clarification on who he was talking to and who he was talking about, and it doesn't even take the time to show what he said when Minjin could hear and then a little bit after. We're left entirely in the dark, which sucks so bad. Their romance feels hollow and empty as a result, since this horrible thing that tore them apart is just never truly resolved. I also have to mention how often Minjun walks away from Jinwon, only for Jinwon to come after him. I swear, Minjun attempts to walk away 3 or 4 times, only to be stopped by Jinwon each time. That is often a very romantic gesture, but it loses its intensity when it happens so often. Granted, it is used for comedic effect occasionally, but for it to happen so much in a 20-episode series, including side stories, that's just too much. I just see no chemistry between these two, and they probably were better off breaking up all that time ago. Admittedly, this story pisses me off. I never thought the day would come when I would complain about a Moscareto story, but today's the day. I don't know how much to put on the adaptation versus the original, but regardless, this was a huge miss for me. It's far heavier in exposition than it should be, yet what needs to be said and discussed never is. It's unfortunate, as I think the foundation for the story has a ton of potential with the exes to lovers, second chance trope, but it just couldn't deliver. There are much better Moscareto adaptations out there, with Moscareto much more involved as far as I can tell, so check those out if you want to give them a shot. Otherwise, steer clear. So, have you read Business as Unusual? If so, what do you think? Do you agree with my assessment? Do you not? Let me know in comment below. Otherwise, I'll catch you next time. Bye!